being hosted by the Minamata Convention Secretariat as part of the pre-COP6 online events week. So here we are today on the session titled Multi-Country Initiatives Addressing Emissions of Mercury. As I already mentioned, it's been organized by the Minamata Convention Secretariat in cooperation with our distinguished colleagues and panelists representing Macquarie University in Australia, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and the World Bank. My name is Alexander Romanov. I'm a Program Management Officer for Capacity Building and Technical Assistance at the Minamata Convention Secretariat here in Geneva. I'll be moderating today's session. And as the session goes, I will introduce our panelists. And without any further ado, I would like to ask, before actually, thank you, before we go to the essence of the presentations and of the session, I have some housekeeping notes for you. So basically, these are the key messages. So once the floor is open, if you would like to take the floor, you need to raise your hand. I will then call names in order of hands raised, so you can unmute yourselves and speak. And after you speak, please lower your hand and mute yourself again. Also, you may wish to type questions in the chat box and send to everyone. So for that, you will need to select this option in the chat. So for any technical assistance, also use the chat box and send to the host or co-host of this event. Please know that the session is being recorded and is being broadcast live on the Minamata Convention Secretariat's YouTube channel. And please also help us to keep improving the experience by filling out the survey at the end of this webinar. So once the webinar is closed, you will be brought to the dedicated web page of the survey. So now, after this housekeeping, I would like to invite Mr. Isaku Toda, Senior Program Management Officer of the Minamata Convention Secretariat, with some welcoming remarks. Isaku, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alexander, and distinguished colleagues. Thank you very much for convening this webinar, and welcome all to the attendees. My name is Isaku Toda, Senior Program Management Officer, dealing with scientific and technical issues in the Minamata Convention Secretariat. Mercury emission is really important. The reason why Minamata Convention exists is because the mercury is a global pollutant due to its the long atmospheric transport, and the emission is the first part of that transport. When the Minamata Convention started being negotiated, the first global mercury assessment said that the coal combustion is the largest source, and after that, after several global mercury assessments, it has turned out that the gold mining is more important, but still, the mercury emission is the origin of the starting point of the Minamata Convention. Despite its importance in terms of the international finance, JEF funding, it took a very long time for any emission-related project to start. At the starting period, most of the JEF finance went to gold mining, process products, and so on. But I would very much congratulate the first project on emissions done by Macquarie University, and also we very much congratulate the the start of the Gemini project, and also to the World Bank. We very much look forward to the big financing to support parties to address the mercury emissions. So I very much look forward to the discussion, and over to Alexander. Thank you.
Thank you, Isako. Thank you very much. So, colleagues and the participants, and before we start, just to make sure that you can ask your questions in the chat box, and also we will have a Q&A session in the end of this webinar after all three presenters are done with their presentations. So the first presentation and will be on the summary of the results from the UNEP and Macquarie University study supported by the Global Environment Facility on the assessment of existing and future emissions reduction from the coal sector towards the implementation of the Minamata and Stockholm Conventions. And the presenter with us today is Professor Leslie Sloss. So Leslie has spent over 34 years with the International Center for Sustainable Carbon, a technical collaboration program under the auspices of the International Energy Agency. Recently, she led a multi-million project to accelerate emission reductions in the energy sector in India, and has previously led several UNEP studies on mercury emissions in emerging regions. Leslie is an adjunct professor at Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. And with this, Leslie, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alexander, and for this introduction. I am indeed going to talk about emissions from the coal sector, and as Isako said, it is the major source of emissions that can be feasibly controlled or easily controlled under the Convention aims. Next slide, please. What I'm going to talk today is about the report that was published last month, the dashboard that works in support of that report, showing you how we handled the data, and then a quick introduction, so potential projects that we could complete in the future. Next slide, please. So this is the report. You can click through to that website, or you can use the QR code and find it. And what you will see is what you get there. It's a sort of 100-page document, I believe, funded by the Global Environment Fund under the UN by Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. It's a very technical document, and it looks at emissions from the coal sector globally and in 10 chosen target countries. Next slide, please. It's quite an academic study, so there's an awful lot of data in there, hence why we provided the data set. We worked basically with the GEM, the Global Energy Monitor Database, which has details of every single coal-fired power plant in the world, under construction and under operation. We choose two baseline scenarios to start with. Business as usual 1, which considers all coal-fired power plants currently in operation or which we expect to be online soon as they are almost completed construction. Business as usual 2 considers all of those plants plus plants that we know under pre-construction or planning, and then we assume that they will be added to the total. We then take those and we multiply the numbers together using the UNEP toolkit to work out the mercury emissions, the POP emissions, and the CO2 emissions from each plant on a unit-by-unit basis. And where possible, we add in any information we can gather on reduction potential due to air pollution control devices in place and so on. Next slide, please. So these are the results for the whole of the coal sector globally. So under business as usual 1, where we expect all plants under construction to be completed, but nothing new, we see coal peaking around 2030, 2035. The dotted line for business as usual 2 takes us out a little bit further, as there may be new plants added in before we reach that peak. But once those plants are in place, each plant is expected to live or operate for 40 years and ultimately close down. We can change that retirement date, and we have done so under different retirement strategies. So for individual countries, you can see that United States, it's well on its retirement path, nothing new built for the last couple of decades and nothing expected. China, almost the global opposite, we see new plants being built and further new potential plants could be added within the next 5 years, hopefully still peaking around 2030, 2035. South Africa, we do not expect any new coal build, but there could be a variation in the decline path depending on how those plants that are operating continue to be operated. Next slide, please. We have 10 focal countries. I'm just going to choose one just to show you the kind of information that's available. So this is India. Next slide, please. And for each of these countries, you will see data like this. I'm not going to take you through it in detail, but you will see the coal demand on the left there, peaking, as I say, sort of now or shortly in the future, and the coal capacity and the coal generated from that coal, which is not always the same thing because plants operate with different frequency and efficiency and capacity. So under different scenarios there, we've included are the stated policy scenarios shown in red. That's where the coal will follow the trajectory in stated policies that are being implemented currently in each country. And under the announced pledges, that's where we get a little bit more ambitious and things we expect to be implemented in the near future. And obviously the coal will decline faster under these more ambitious policies. Next slide, please. Here we see, again, the data for India. We see peaking around 2030, could be higher if the new plants under discussion go ahead. But more importantly, we look at the age of the units, the number of units at a certain age and the capacity of those units. So what we see for India is an awful lot of young plants and an awful lot of big young plants. So a lot of these plants will continue to operate for the next 30 to 40 years or so. Next slide, please. Adding to that, we've taken as much information as we can on the efficiency of the plants and what control technologies they have in place. Flue gas desulfurization is there for sulfur control, but is very good for reducing mercury in certain situations. So we put that information in there based on a plant-by-plant knowledge of installation. Next slide, please. Which gets us to the final, what we really want to know is what's going to happen with respect to the mercury emissions, for example. So we expect mercury emissions in India to already be declining because the new plants going in are more efficient and cleaner plants. And we're also seeing the installation of FGD happening. So over time, we see mercury accumulating. And if we can, if the new plants don't get built, the ones under discussion, then the cumulative mercury emissions could be slightly lower in future. However, more interestingly, next slide, please. We can look at scenarios. For example, on the top there in the red, we have the business as usual 1 and 2. But if we start to build in the installation of FGD, we can see that lovely low purple line there. That would be if all India plants installed FGD at the rate they're supposed to be doing, then the mercury would come down fairly rapidly, much more rapidly. Unfortunately, it's following that dotted purple trajectory because there are challenges, economic and technical, to get big, expensive kit into India and operating. So if you look at the cumulative mercury over time, we're going to see somewhere between high mercury emissions in a situation where all new plants are built and the FGD takes a while to kick in, to where we would like it to be, where new plants are kind of halted and FGD goes in as fast as possible. And that is a difference of almost 1,000 tons of mercury. So that's a huge change that could be made by simple policy changes. Next slide, please. These are the conclusions in the report. I'm not going to take you through them because they're far too complex and they vary globally and also from country to country. But I want you to draw your attention to the fact that we do look at the global capacity, the coal capacity in each country, and how that may change over time. We look at what's driving their climate action and also their policy with respect to POPs, mercury and so on, how that might affect emissions. And also we have chapters on POPs, mercury, fine particulates, looking at the health impacts, and how important it is to get these emissions down as quickly as we possibly can. Next slide, please. This is the dashboard. This is where the data are. If you don't want to read in the report in detail, I understand, you can go and you can play with this. You can click through to that website or you can use a QR code, and this is what the landing page will look like. I am not going to take us through that live because I'm working from a small computer in remote Scotland and nobody wants that amount of clunkiness in real time. So what I've done is take some screen captures and take you through what will happen. That landing page there explains what we did and how we do it. You can click through to all the assumptions we made and everything we did to those numbers. And the choices on your right are the map, the current situation, or the future scenarios. Next slide, please. The data set, I have to remind you, is based on those results that I discussed, the GEM database and any information we could gather. It does not allow you to create your own future scenarios. You have to work with those that we built, and you have to live. If you want that changed, then you would need to give us more money and we would need to extend the project. And we would suggest wholeheartedly that the data set would need to be updated, at least with the GEM data, every 6 months to every year. Next slide, please. But this is the kind of information you can look at, which is actually quite fun. So for example, this is the information on the coal plant map for the whole of the world. And down on the right there, you will see that the red are the operating plants, and you can also focus in on those under construction and so on. You can then click through to the GRULAC region or the Asia Pacific and get more focused information on that, or you can click your way through to our project focus countries. For example, next slide, please. For India, you can see a lovely mix there of plants well spread across the country, a lot of operating, but more cancelled or being phased out, which is interesting. And just give you an idea of where they are. You can click in on each of these for more individual plant data if you want to do so. Clicking through the current situation, next slide, please. This is the global information. Again, you can click through to regional or country specific, and you can also focus on just plants that are operating or add in those business as usual to assumptions. But what you can see there is what plants are operating, the capacity, the amount of mercury coming on a country by country basis, and the CO2 emissions coming out. So obviously China, a lot of plants there, a lot of mercury and a lot of CO2. Next slide, please. And this is where you get to see the scenario results. As I said, you can't change them, but you can click between the business as usual 1 and 2. And you can also look at what changes in capacity factor. The capacity factor is an assumption we made. If you consider 100% capacity factor, that would mean every plant in the world is running full speed all the time constantly, which is not the case. So we put in variable capacity factors. Based on our best knowledge. However, if you do want to see what would be happening under a worst case scenario when everything was running full blast, you can also look at that as well. And obviously you can focus in on the individual countries. Again, you can't change the assumptions. You can only look in detail at the results that we came up with. Next slide, please. So future projects that we would like to see coming out of this was part of the project was to discuss a bigger follow-on piece of work to ensure that the implementation takes into account the results that we've produced. So we would like to see the data set maintained, at least annually updated. We would love to see new assumptions and future scenarios being built in there, but that could be quite costly. And we would love to see a daughter project that we have named Glide Path, which I will quickly run through. Next slide, please. As we know, global coal power plants, even if we stop building them tomorrow, and most of us are stopping the building, they're going to be there for the next 30, 40 years or so, at least. Next slide, please. What we also know and what we could not build into the data set is the fact that the plants that are continuing to operate are not going to operate at full efficiency for the remaining lifetime. A lot of them will be grandfathered or will be run like an old car to get the maximum amount of joy out of them until they die. They will not be maintained well. Also, they will be what we call flexing. As we put more renewable energy into the grid, solar and wind, those are variable, and so you're having to turn your coal and your gas and your nuclear up and down to fill those gaps. And a coal plant doesn't work well in a flexing situation. Next slide, please. To cut to the chase, a flexing plant gets hot and cold, they break, they fall over, and their emissions can go up by up to 25%. So that could mean that the calculations that we put in our data set could be, for some of those units, out by up to 25%. And that is terrifying because that will not be an overestimate, that will be an underestimate. And this could increase as plants age and move towards retirement. We are going to see emissions going up on a plant by plant basis. Next slide, please. And even if you only increase efficiency marginally, this is an example of a plant in Vietnam, where we improve the efficiency of that plant by 2 to 3%, which isn't much, you will reduce efficiency of that plant by 100,000 tonnes of CO2 a year, by up to 3 tonnes of mercury a year, and you would save costs of over $100,000 per week, because coal is not cheap and they use a lot of it. So looking at this, it's a no-brainer for these plants to invest money to maintain efficiency and so on. But that's not how it works in practice. If you've got an old plant that's moving towards shutting down, you're not going to spend a lot of money in increasing that efficiency. And what we want to do is work with those plants to show that there are cost-effective ways of doing that. Next slide, please. And also at the same time, as a plant moves towards retirement and gets old, the control technologies don't work as well. So the emissions are going to go up from them also. Next slide, please. So the path through flexibility aging, we have to take into technical. We need to make sure those plants are working as well as we possibly can. We need to make sure that the policy evolves to consider these changes in the way that coal plants operate, perhaps allow a little bit of leniency in the way they do so, and an integrated approach in the bigger grid to make sure that all the sources of power are working together to reduce emissions. So perhaps prioritising the use of cleaner plants at times when power demand is high. Simple approaches, but ones which take a sort of top-down approach to the control of that fleet. Next slide, please. We have produced this glide path proposal. I'm not going to talk through this in detail. I could give you a separate presentation and I can send you a short 5-pager proposal on this. But what we want to do is work with the remaining coal fleets to make sure that as they move towards retirement, the plants remain as efficient and clean as possible as they do so. Next slide, please. Just thank you to my team, Edward Archer, who built the data set and did 90% of the hard work, to Peter Nelson, who pulled the project together, and to Miriam, who's sorry not listed here, who did the gender issues. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Professor Sloss. This indeed has been a very substantial piece of work. And just to repeat that any questions can be addressed to the presenter in the chat or at the end in the Q&A session. So now I would like to move to our second presentation, which is on the Global Elimination of Mercury in Non-ferrous Metals Initiative, Gemini in short, and it will be delivered by Veronica Villasis, who is the Industrial Development Officer at United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Veronica is an environmental engineer specializing in audits, management, and legislation, with expertise spanning renewable energy, oil and gas, mining, climate, and chemicals and waste. She has guided international projects and NGOs worldwide, shaping policies and practices that foster a more sustainable future. Veronica, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Alexander, for that kind introduction. And on behalf of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, it's a pleasure for me to be here sharing this webinar with you today. As it was mentioned, I'm going to talk about the Gemini program that we are proposing and creating actually with the support of the GEF, the Global Environment Facility, implementing and currently in several countries. So next slide, please. The objective of the Gemini project is to help the industries and the countries to meet their environmental commitments with the Minamata Convention, especially reducing the mercury emissions that are produced in the non-ferrous metals production, and implement also innovative practices and demonstrative technologies that will help to reduce these mercury emissions in the different elements that are part of these systems in the smelters, for example, in the dust collectors, in the flue gas purification, in the acid plant. So there are several technologies that we have identified that could be feasible to be implemented or tested at least in several countries, and that's why we want to propose this global program that will be executed in a first branch of countries and then later on potentially in other. Next slide, please. For selecting the participating countries, we assessed all the exporting data, all the production actually of non-ferrous metal, because the market was very important for us, and we assessed all of these commodities happening and where they were going to be, where they are produced and to where they are imported. So this was one of the first considerations that we assessed for choosing the countries that were invited, but we also included other assessments, especially the mercury emissions. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, for example, this is the international reference of the EDGAR software that it's available and that will give us this idea of the emissions by country and main source category. So as you can see here, there are several non-ferrous metals that are producing those emissions of mercury, and these are those countries that are quite relevant for us. We were lucky that most of these countries wanted to participate in our project, and currently we are engaging with 6 of them. Next slide, please. As you can see here, those selected countries are working on reducing the mercury emissions in several sectors, especially in the lead extraction and initial processing, in the copper extraction, also gold extraction, aluminum, and zinc. As you can see here, gold is the biggest generator of mercury emissions, but actually zinc is very important too. And regardless of the emissions, also the production of each country is important, because to help these developing countries to fulfill the requirements of the Minamata Convention, then of course we will need to review which of these non-ferrous metals are more important in each of the different countries that are part of the program. Next slide, please. Here you can see at the end the countries that are part of this initiative currently. It's India, Peru, Zambia, Mexico, Chile, and South Africa. Brazil was part at the beginning, but potentially it will be included in the future, potentially in the new GEF cycle with additional countries. That's our expectation. So, but currently we are working only with this 6th country, and we have requested the GEF to provide the financing of 58.8 million for supporting all of these countries to reduce the mercury emissions in the process of smelting, especially. Next slide, please. The program and each of the child projects that are part of it will have the same configuration of components. Actually, we have proposed 4 of them. The first one is the policy and regulations. The second one is the finance and investment, because we know that to introduce and to propose new technologies, we will need this finance and investment. Also in the component number 3, this is going to propose the technical assistance, the capacity building, and the introduction of best environmental practices and best available technologies, and also to promote these alternative business models of the current activities that are happening in the non-ferrous metal sector. And in the component number 4 is basically based on the knowledge management, communication, and coordination. So what we want to do is that all of these components are applied equally in the different countries, of course, changing the potential outputs a little bit, and also, of course, the activities that are going to be tailored to each of the participating countries. But we want to ensure this coherence in the national policies and regulations locally, increase this finance access, and I think that maybe your next presentation supporting the international banking help will be really interesting after this presentation of the Gemini program. We want to also enhance the uptake of mercury-free technologies and practices in non-ferrous metal production through demonstrating sustainable business models, this capacity building, and also this technical assistance that could actually help us to visibly reduce these mercury emissions during the control, monitoring, and storage, and also of the different materials and processing in the smelters. We want to establish this knowledge management platform and build a transformative partnership with different stakeholders across the globe, and of course in each of the different countries that are participating. So just for giving you a brief introduction of the specific outcomes that we are expecting under each component, I'm going to present you now quickly what's considered under each of these components. So next slide, please. In the component number 1, especially regarding this enabling policies, we want to introduce we don't want to duplicate the regulatory framework that already exists in the country, but we want to identify these gaps that are there in the regulations that will help us in the future to propose enhanced rules and legislation that will ensure this coherence, transparency, and accountability for mercury reduction actions. We want to enhance these operational frameworks also, because sometimes it's not only important that we have enhanced or better regulations. The enforcement of those regulations is also important, and that's why we want to work with these operational frameworks for the control and monitor of these mercury emissions. And then, of course, promote that the stakeholders actively work with us, enforcing, monitoring, and promoting these technical standards that are going to be enhanced in each of the different child projects. Next slide, please. The outcome number 2, here, when we want to promote these financial instruments to be increased, and that this technology transfer also is available for introducing new mercury emissions reductions technologies. We know that with the different budgets in the different countries, maybe it would not be enough to make substantial changes if a smelter needs to work in the full line of production, for example. So that's why we know that maybe the request for additional financing and financial opportunities is going to be important. That's why we want to promote this to enhance the current existing financial instruments that are going to be first assessed and then be identified, which are available to be accessible for the different industries and different supply chains, let's say, that is going to be related to those smelting facilities, and then promote this knowledge exchange and business partnerships with international technology suppliers that's going to be generated in order that to facilitate the access to cost to budgeting of new investments, and of course to promote this access to financial instruments. Next slide, please. In the component number 3, so once we have the policies, once we have potential financial instruments that will be available or be accessible, in the component number 3, we want to propose all the best technologies and the best practices. So basically here is where it will be very important, the baselines that we're going to collect with the different smelting facilities, because those baselines will allow us to propose specifically the technologies or the best practices that could reduce the mercury emissions in each of the different parts of the smelting processes or roasting processes. So that's why we also need here to enhance these laboratory capacities for mercury monitoring, because some of the countries do not have this local capacity and rely on international laboratory existence. Then we want to create these demonstrative studies that are developed to introduce actually this reduction. For this, we have reviewed previously, for example, several technical documents and papers and publications that suggest that depending on the type of technologies and the specific parts of the smelting process that we are going to assess, we could find reductions from 4% to even 50% of a reduction of mercury emissions. So that's why we have come to an average of 10% that we're going to show you a little bit later on in this presentation. But actually, the goal is that when we want to implement here in this component, this technical assistance and this promotion of best technologies and demonstrative studies, the goal is to achieve at least this 10% of reduction of the mercury emissions in the different elements, either the dust collectors or the flue gas purification or the acid plant, for example. So with this collaborative framework also, we will include different stakeholders related to the industry, related to the technology providers, and of course with the monitoring of the emissions. Next slide, please. And the component number 4, that's actually once we execute all of these pilot projects and demonstrative case studies in the component number 3, enhance the legislation, of course, and propose that those additional requirements for additional finance could have access to local banking or international banking. We want to disseminate all of this knowledge, all of these best practices, actually the results that we are going to get with this program and with all of the 6 child projects that we're going to perform. So that's why under this outcome, basically we are promoting this communication networks and a scientific material that's going to be created either on the public, private, or community awareness raising initiatives and partnerships. And we want to share this, creating knowledge sharing platform that's going to be supporting the different activities that the global component and also the child projects are going to be executing. So within this framework, we believe that enhancing the policy, providing actions and let's say opportunities and like a pipeline for new investments. Component number 3, providing this technical assistance and capacity building, and then component number 4, sharing all of this result and knowledge that is collected in these projects. We think that we can definitely create an impact that can be replicated in other countries and that could be scaled up later on to further developments or further initiatives in the non-ferrous metal sector. Next slide, please. And by doing that, our goal, as I mentioned it, is to at least promote this 10% reduction of the emissions reductions. And for this, the baselines were calculated using the Mercury inventory toolkit promoted by UNEP, and then, of course, by the Minamata Convention. And we expect that at least with our project, we will reduce 37.4 tons of mercury emissions in all the countries that are part of this project. And I want to here indicate that actually we are 3 UN agencies, implementing agencies collaborating in this program. Is UNIDO as the lead agency and also working in Chile, Zambia, and Peru. UNEP working in South Africa, and the UNDP team working in India and Mexico. Next slide, please. Currently, all the projects, the child projects, the 6 child projects, and the global child project are in the PPG phase. We are working closely with the national teams that are being consolidated in each of the different child projects in each country. And we are going to have an inception workshop actually after the COP6. So we think that it's a really good moment after all the results of COP6 are really fresh and will guide us also in some specific details. So we're going to have this inception workshop right after the COP, and potentially in the following months we're collecting these baselines, preparing all the CEO endorsement documentation to be submitted to the GEF. So we expect that the submission to the GEF will happen in June next year, 2026. And that's why currently working in all of these countries is the biggest challenge that we have, to collect accurate data and actually to collect this baseline that could reflect how we could implement later on the objectives, that is the best practices and the best technologies also. So it's a fascinating work that we are starting with the different countries in this non-ferrous metal sector. And yeah, we will be pleased if at the end of the next, let's say mid next year, we can have the approval of the GEF to actually start the execution and implementation of all these 6 projects. Next slide, please. This is my last slide, and actually the conclusions and why we are promoting this Gemini program in general is that we want to contribute to the Minamata Convention and the obligations under it that are requested to all the parties. And Gemini will directly support, for example, the Article 8 in emissions by introducing these best available techniques and best environmental practices in the non-ferrous metal sector. By reducing, of course, the mercury emissions. In the Article 11, for example, developing environmental zone management and long-term secure storage of mercury byproducts and waste, preventing the re-entry of mercury into the commerce. and is supporting also the Article 17 and 19, for example, establishing a global knowledge platform for data sharing, capacity building, and awareness raising linked to the UNEP Global Mercury Partnership resources also, and of course to the Minamata Secretariat resources too. Consequently, the Gemini represents a programmatic sector-wide approach to mercury reduction that will complement national action plans and will align also to the COP6 emphasis on scaling up global actions. By addressing these mercury emissions from the non-ferrous metal sector, the Gemini positions itself as a flagship initiative showcasing how coordinated international cooperation can advance the Convention's long-term vision for a mercury-free world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Veronica. Thanks for this presentation. I mean, indeed, the program is very promising, so we look forward to next steps and to collaborating with you on this one. So our third and last presenter for today comes from the World Bank with the presentation Mercury emission reduction through air quality management operations. So our distinguished guest is Mr. Harinath Sesha, Senior Environmental Engineer at the World Bank. So Mr. Harinath has been working in the East Asia and Pacific region at the World Bank, and during the last 18 years, he has led the preparation and implementation of air pollution, solid waste management, contaminated site management, and hazardous chemicals industrial pollution operations across South Asia, Middle East, and North Africa. As well as East Asia and Pacific regions. Currently, he is co-leading the development and implementation of 2 global programs on elimination of polychlorinated biphenyls and mercury emission reduction with the Global Environment Department. So, Mr. Harinath, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the Minamata Convention for inviting the World Bank to present this the idea rather. So as you can see, what we're trying to do is like going with the concept of scaling up the investment interventions on hazardous chemicals and waste sector. Building on again our successful experience on the PCB program, global program on PCBs, we're trying to discuss and see if we can link up mercury emission reduction with our number of air quality management operations across the world. So what I'm going to present now is a concept which we are trying to discuss with Jeff and see whether this is something will be of interest, and then of course in terms of the potential and reduction. So it's a brief presentation, but I would be happy to receive feedback and to fine tune, so that the idea is to scale up and see how we can leverage different investment streams to achieve the global objective of mercury free world. Sorry, I think, yeah. So the first thing is, like, as many of us know, the mercury emission sources and then air quality emission sources are quite overlapping, especially on the PM 2.5 side. So I just want to try to present the rationale how we thought this would be something good to scale up. So as we know, like, these are the 5 mercury emission sources under Annex D of the Minamata Convention. If you compare the PM 2.5 emission potential in these sectors, of course, coal stands out, where the PM 2.5 emissions we know are going to range between 12 to 68 micrograms per cubic meter. And this again varies from country to country, context to context. So this is just to give an indication on what is the potential. And if you link up with the cities where air pollution is the main source, the coal emissions from coal-fired plants almost contributes anywhere between 15 to 40% of total PM 2.5 emissions. So that's a quite substantial contribution. And same thing would apply for the industrial boilers. They generate anywhere between 10 to 15 micrograms per meter cube. And then the stack emissions, these PM2 emission levels are almost about 30% of the total stack emissions. So these are the 2 main, contributors. We do have non-ferrous metals that Unido just presented. So There would be emissions, but these vary from technologies, etc. So our main focus today in this concept is at least to focus on industrial boilers and coal-fired plants. But of course, there are what you call interrelations between other sectors as well, where emissions, PM 2.5 emissions are quite substantial. And one additional source which we want to bring it up, because this is something we do feel it's very important, but this is for the COP parties to consider, is household heating, where it is pretty retail, very local level, but cumulatively the household heating also contributes to a very significant source of PM 2.5 emissions and also mercury. So this is something right now it's not on the list of sources, but this is something we do feel that's very important to consider. And then so in terms of, so just to give the scale of this, in case if you think this concept is interesting, see what is the scale of this emission reduction that we can achieve, both in terms of mercury reduction, PM 2.5, and also climate co-benefits. So just a quick illustrative example on industrial boilers. If you assume that a 1 ton boiler, coal-fired boiler is being used, then we do know that, okay, its calorific value, again, country to country and then sector to sector, but taking an average gas calorific value of 5,500 kilocalories, we do see that annual emissions on mercury would be anywhere between 45 to 90 grams, and then PM 2.5 would be 667 kgs, and then CO2 emissions would be 609 tons. And if you scale them up, for say typically 1 ton boiler is just an illustration, but if you take a 10 ton boiler, then a mercury reduction is going to be 18 kgs and then 133 tons of PM 2.5 and 121,800 tons of CO2 emissions reduced. So this is quite substantial if you look at the scale. Again, obviously we don't intervene in one boiler, so there will be tens or hundreds of boilers. So the cumulatively the potential, if you focus on industrial boilers together with our air pollution and mercury reduction, it's going to be quite substantial. Similarly, this again, as I said, this is something we realized as we worked on urban air quality programs, where household heating is quite substantial. And then cumulatively, each of them are quite contribute to quite significant levels of both PM 2.5 and then mercury reduction. So just an illustration here again to see that, okay, assuming that a typical individual household boiler to be anywhere between 50 to 60,000 BTUs with fuel as a coal, the gross calorific value, again, it will be a little bit smaller. So it's between anywhere 27 to 31 megajoules per kg. The annual coal consumption at a household level would be 5 tons. So the mercury reductions could be anywhere between 2.5 grams annually. And of course, over a lifetime, it would be about 25 grams. And then PM 2.5 emissions, again, at 10 kgs, and then CO2 emissions would be at 9 tons. So this again, typically here in a city, any intervention would be in thousands of households. So if you look at thousands of households, the mercury reduction would be 25 kgs, and then PM 2.5 would be 100 tons, and then CO2 reduction would be 90,000 tons. So, and again, the demonstrative effect of these would be like if it spreads across entire city or entire significant portion of the country, especially we see this issue coming out pretty strongly in Central Asian countries. So if you focus on those countries, then probably the contribution and then mercury reduction could be again substantial. So this is something, at least through this session, I would like to highlight if this is something for the COP to consider, where there is a good potential of mercury reduction and also air pollution reduction. Then we try to look at our profile of bank projects, how we can link this up with our own programs and projects. And as you can see, these are the latest projects in addition to the number of other programs that are currently implemented. We have about 11 of them currently linked to this kind of what we call air pollution, industrial emission reduction interventions. 5 of them, of course, like in Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and Turkey, all of them are on industrial emission control. So where we can really link up with industrial boiler efficiency, where we can get industrial emission reduction, air pollution reduction, and of course, mercury emission reduction. And these are quite substantial number of size of the project. So in terms of the co-benefits and then co-financing that is typically that we require under any JEF program would be quite substantial. Then, like I said, there are significant number of, again, projects where we intervene in household level heating. This is where we realize that there is a good case for trying to see if we can link up with mercury reduction also. And put a case for Jeff to consider is like we have right now as we speak, we have one in Kyrgyz, the other one in Bosnia, and then there are projects and programs that we implemented in Poland, Mongolia, and China. So all of these cases where we had a significant level of household heating interventions, even there we realized that, okay, there is quite a bit of co-benefits that we can achieve on the mercury reduction. So considering that, we thought we can develop a global program, and then if we can link up with our projects and programs, such a program would be quite impactful. So the rationale, again, as I said, it is the size and scale of air quality projects that we typically interfere or intervene. So that would provide both in terms of the impact and then also in terms of the investment. And then Jeff grant, again, to encourage industries and households. With a grant combination, we can design a financing mechanism that will be more attractive, both for the countries and also for the industries. So that would be the rationale how we thought this could be something we can consider. And then the approach, of course, would be identify the projects that are in preparation in the bank portfolio, but we can also consider working together with other development partners like the way we are doing the global PCB program. And then, of course, we need to assess the viability, especially in terms of the size and scale, because we don't want to intervene in a very small scale intervention, especially when you are working on an air quality program. And then financing mechanism here to see which kind of mechanism that works, the combination of grant and then lending from the World Bank's IDA, IBRD arms, how we can leverage that. And of course, including other policy regulatory programs, primarily focused on mercury and AQM actions, so that this program can be scaled up. So this is the quick, what we call theory of change that we consider. Essentially, like I said, look at the portfolio, assess the emission potential, engage with the stakeholders, identify the child projects, and then develop the program framework document. And then what would happen is, like, probably with this global program, we hope to establish the feasibility at what size and scale such a co-benefits and co-financing can be really leveraged, and then try to see what is the interest of the stakeholders, if they are really excited about this program, and then how do they see its potential in terms of the mercury and air quality reduction, and develop a framework for future air quality projects where mercury reduction can be included. So this is what we kind of are discussing with the Jeff right now. And once this is done, hopefully we will be able to develop a global program similar to the Gemini that UNIDO colleagues are preparing right now. So these are the next steps we are considering. Basically, we do the consultation with the stakeholders, both internally and externally, and then also to see and if convention can consider mercury release from non-industrial, basically household boilers also is one area where we can leverage upon. If that happens, that will be excellent. But of course, otherwise, industrial boilers is also a significant portion of what do you call an option where we can link up both air quality and then mercury reduction, and then try to mobilize the resources both from Jeff and then internally, so that we can establish a global program on mercury reduction focused on industrial boilers. But this will be building on our ongoing global PCB elimination program. So it's kind of learning from that experience and then trying to see how we can establish a similar program on mercury as well. So that's brief from my side. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Harnath. Just a follow-up question right away, if possible. What is the time frame you envisage with building this global program? When it could start, so to say?
So it's like kind of in discussion with the Jeff. So once we get the Jeff approval, then we would be preparing the global framework document. So I would say probably in the next few months, we should be preparing the global program, and then implementation could start maybe second half of next year.
Okay, so it's a month, not years. Okay, thank you.
No, not years. It's months,
yes.
of course.
Yes. Okay.
So it depends on how the concept flies. So probably the feedback today also would be useful, so that we can tweak if there is something that we get interesting feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanan. Thank you very much, colleagues. We appreciate your time. And dear participants, if there are any questions, please feel free. Now it's the time for Q&A session. We don't have much time, but we will try to respond to questions. If you have any, please raise your hands and let us know if. So I have a question from Carmen Capriles. So
Yes.
please.
Hello, good morning. I'm Carmen Capriles. I am from Bolivia, and I'm part of Reacción Climática IPEN and the Women Major Group for UNEA. And my question is, if I understand that there is going to be a resolution on air during the next UNEA, and I'm wondering if it's worth it or if it already includes the part of like the emissions of mercury, since we have seen how all the troubles that can generate. That would be my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We also have a question from Linda Jaramillo in the chat, and it reads, are these initiatives involving bottom-up approaches to engage stakeholders, and which stakeholders? I assume that this question goes both to Veronica and to Harinath. Let me check again if there's anything else before we switch to. Okay, I don't see any so far. So I would first ask Veronica and Harnath to very briefly comment on the question in terms of the bottom-up approach and engagement of stakeholders. Veronica.
Thank you. Yeah, well, actually, since we are going to work exclusively, let's say, with the smelters and the smelting facilities, those are our first stakeholders, the different non-ferrous metal plants that are smelting either zinc, copper, gold, or any other non-ferrous metal that it's selected and prioritized in each of the countries. Those will be our baseline. We cannot include so specific activities regarding the mining sector itself, because we know that the sources of the raw material that the smelters use are quite different and acquire a variety. However, that's why we are engaging actually with the public sector and with the ministries of mining in the different countries, because they are the key stakeholder to engage, of course, with other additional public institutions, especially regulatory authorities in several aspects, not only in the environmental part, but also in the economic matters. So yeah, we are engaging basically with this, but the key driver are the smelting plants that we are selecting, and actually each country right now in the PPG phases are assessing and evaluating which smelters are going to be part of this project, and of course in the future execution of the activities. I hope that it answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Harnath, anything to it?
Yeah, so yeah, we do engage. It's like basically bottoms up approach. In fact, because we have our own stakeholder engagement requirements, and then the concept itself is linked to our ongoing projects. So part of those projects, we engage with all the stakeholders, both the industry and the local stakeholders. And especially in this case for Nepal, where we were trying to do industrial boilers, we have engaged with both the women stakeholder groups, women entrepreneurs, and then industrial associations, and of course the government counterparts. And one last point I would like to highlight is, in fact, our consultations in the Central Asia is the reason why we came with this idea of like household heating is another significant contributor for mercury reduction. So it's coming in actually from the stakeholder consultations. And there will be much more structured consultations once the concept is like kind of in principle agreed with the JEF. Then in the PPG phase, we really have to do the consultations as we develop the whole global program. So that would be much more focused and then much more intensive. But in the concept comes from the consultations for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Harnath. Thanks a lot. And then I would like to ask Isaku to comment on the UNEA resolution.
Thank you, Alexander, and thank you for the question. And this is a really important and interesting question. The air pollution issues that UNEA is handling is more or less more urgent needs of the health impact of the local air pollution, and the as you know, the mercury emission affects to a large extent through the global cycling. Having said this, there's of course there's a co-benefit between the conventional air pollution measures and the mercury pollution and also POPs and also the conventional air pollutants like the particulates and others has also global impacts like the climate change and so on. So we need a linkage between the local air pollution issue and global the global issues. So we very much look forward to the discussion in UNEA. The Minamata Convention Secretariat will also attend the UNEA and look forward to the fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Saku. So with this, I would like. Okay, there is one more question. Could you please briefly mention what are those approaches for engagement or how they look like? I'm not sure we have time for that question, but if you just a couple of words from Veronica and from Harnath, just if anything.
Yeah, thank you. Just the approaches for engagement, actually.
Yes, just yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, currently at this phase of the PPG phase, we are still working with this authority level, let's say, the public sector. So once we get to that, it's like we will define this actually. We have not established the exact approach by now because we are in the ongoing process in the PPG phase. So in this preparatory grant and baselines, we hope that at the end we will for sure include a stakeholder management plan that will be part of the future execution of the project. So at that time, I think that maybe by the first quarter of next year, we'll have a better understanding of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Harnath, anything to add?
No, I think the approaches are pretty, what do you call it, specific. We can consult, organize meetings, meet the different stakeholders, like I said, have meetings with the industry groups, workshops to get their feedback. The same thing applies with different other stakeholders. We identify in each country what they are, and then we have basically these kind of focused workshops and meetings. So those are the ones. And like it was said earlier, it depends on when we identify the countries, then we'll identify the stakeholders and then identify the specific structured consultations specific to that country. So at this stage, in our concept, it's pretty early to say who and then where and how it will happen. But in the PPG phase, we will have more clarity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you for all participants. There's been a very useful session, and it will be available for future views on the Minamata Convention website. With this, I would like to conclude this event, and I would like to thank Isaku. I would like to thank our support team, Sharful and Maya, and I wish you all a good afternoon, good evening, and have a good day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alexander.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Shariful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.